Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is this week's meals for you. So to get started, we are going to make a lentil kale soup. Stephen was actually gone this particular week away for work, and when he is gone, I try to make everything vegetable heavy, and I try to incorporate a lot of legumes and beans and stuff into my meals because he's a meat and potato type of guy, and I'm more of like a vegetable and then some meat. And so when he's gone, I try to tend to cook a little bit more my style. So this is one of the meals that I definitely would consider my style. To get started, I am going to add equal 1 onion, 2 large cloves of garlic minced, and 3 stalks of celery diced. I had a whole bunch of frozen vegetables in my freezer, so that's what I'm just doing, is just kind of eyeballing it and just dumping them all into this large stock pot. I have a couple tablespoons of olive oil also in there, and so you're just going to cook them until they are nice and transparent and cook through, nice and soft pretty much. So I'm rinsing off 1 cup of uncooked lentils. I am using a green or brown lentil in this, but the recipe does call for a red lentil. I did a little bit of research and they are very, very interchangeable. You can use one lentil for the other. The red just tends to cook up a little bit quicker than the brown ones do. So once the celery and the onions and the garlic were all nice and cooked through, I'm going to come in and add 1 bay leaf, 1 1/4 teaspoons of ground cumin, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, half a teaspoon of ground coriander, 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika. I actually think I came in and added almost 3/4 teaspoon because I really love the taste of smoked paprika. And I also added a little pinch of some cayenne pepper. So I'm going to cook that all nice until it is really fragrant. And then I'm going to come in and add 1 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes, and you want to add it with their juice. And then it says 5 to 6 cups of a vegetable broth, plus more if needed. I had a little bit of chicken stock in my fridge that I needed to get used up, so I added this to it also. And then you want to come in and add those rinsed lentils. Now you want to bring this mixture to a boil and then reduce the heat to medium and simmer it uncovered for 20 to 25 minutes until the lentils are tender and fluffy. At this point, then you're going to season it with some salt and pepper. I had to go a little bit longer because, again, I was using the brown lentils and not red. So mine probably took maybe about 30 minutes in total to cook completely through. Once the lentils are cooked through, you're going to come in then and take the bay leaves out and just discard them. And then you're going to stir in about 2 handfuls of destemmed torn kale leaves. You can use spinach in this, but I love kale in everything, so I added probably, I would say, maybe 2 cups of kale in it. And then you're just going to, again, just stir that until the kale is nice and wilted, and then it says serve immediately. So I decided to just kind of make mine a little bit more fancy, and then I grated some Parmesan cheese over top of it. This was a very hearty meal. I probably would go back and add just a touch bit more broth to it because it did turn out pretty thick, but other than that, it was super delicious. For the next meal, we are going to make something that I have wanted to make in such a long time. And again, because Stephen wasn't here this particular week, I was really just trying everything out. The other thing too is I noticed that a whole bunch of my butternut squashes were starting to go bad. So I really needed to get these used up. So this was one of the meals, again, that I've wanted to try for a really long time. It is an apple sausage stuffed butternut squash. So to get started, I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, and I'm just going to take my butternut squash and cut it in half and just get all of the seeds and kind of all of the insides of the squash out. And then I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper and just kind of smear them. I'm going to turn them upside down, and I'm going to bake them for about 40 to 45 minutes and just until they are cooked through. So while that was cooking, I was just kind of getting everything else prepped. This recipe calls for 1 onion or half of an onion, and again, Stephen's not home. I am using all of the onions. So I'm getting this nice and finely diced up. What I'm doing here is I take all of my veggie scraps and just put them into a bag and leave them in the freezer, and when it comes time to make my broth, I just take that bag out, and then that's what I use to add to my bones, and it makes a delicious broth. No food waste at all around here. So I am finally dicing up half of that onion. Now to a skillet, I'm going to add a full pound of Italian sausage. The recipe recommends using half a pound, but I actually wanted to double this or make more than it originally called for because I wanted to get some in the freezer as well. I'm really trying to kind of make one for now, make one for later, because it's just easier for me sometimes for lunch just to be able to grab that stuff from the freezer. So making a little bit more than the recipe calls for, but again, like I always say, my recipes, I will leave them linked below for you guys so that you will have the actual measurements for the recipe and not just kind of how I go off of recipes, because I really do. I just do my own thing with a lot of recipes. Recipes for me are just like a loose guideline, and I just kind of do what I have available. That's the whole point of the pantry challenge as well, is just to use what you have available. So again, the butternut squash, we needed to get them used, so this was a perfect recipe for it. So getting the Italian sausage all cooked up, we're gonna add that onion in. We're gonna add 3 cloves of minced garlic, and then I was also pre-prepping my apple. I was using 1 apple and just dicing that up. So you're gonna add 2 cups of a lightly packed baby spinach. Now I just chose to use frozen spinach. That's what I have available. I didn't have any fresh stuff, and it did work perfectly fine. So you're gonna cook that through, and then you're gonna come in and add the apple. You're also going to add 1 tablespoon of fresh sage, finely chopped, and half a teaspoon of fresh rosemary, finely chopped. And then you're just gonna cook that all together. Come in, add a little bit of salt and pepper. The other thing that I was pre-prepping in the background there was I was just getting some pecans, a 1/4 cup of pecans just chopped, because that is another thing that we added in here as well. So you wanna just cook everything until it is completely cooked through and just kind of wait for the butternut squash to be done. So the recipe recommends taking your butternut squash and scooping some of the insides out. Now these were really, really thin ones. There was not a lot of inside to them. So I just opted just to leave them like that. And then what you're gonna do is take the butternut squash and just stuff it with that filling that we just made. Now I had 2 little end pieces there. I ended up just putting them in my fridge and eating them later on. They were perfect. Now, the recipe does not suggest this, but I like to do this because I have to have cheese on everything. I came in and added probably a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese to the top of them. You're gonna put this back into the oven, and you are going to put this under the broiler, and you're gonna cook it for about 5 minutes, just until everything is kind of melted on the top and just heated through together. I am so glad that I finally tried this. I don't know why I've never made it before. It is really, really delicious. For the next meal, we are going to do another butternut squash one because again, we really needed to get them used. We're gonna do kind of like a creamy butternut squash pasta. I had recently borrowed a book from the library. I think it was like a Taste of Home Best of cookbook, and this was one of the recipes that was in there, and I very, very loosely followed it. I went off of it, like way off of it, but I have left it linked for you guys, the original one that kind of inspired this. So again, I have my oven preheated up 400 degrees, and I just cut my butternut squash in half, took out all of the insides, all the seeds, and I just put some olive oil on it, some salt and pepper, and I'm just poking the outside of it. It does help it cook a little bit quicker when you do this. It looks a little brutal. It's great to do if you have a lot of frustration. Just put some holes in butternut squash. So I put that in my oven and I cooked it for about 40 minutes. On the stovetop, I am getting some pasta cooked. This was a bag that I accidentally mixed 2 different types of pasta in there. So what I did was just threw the whole bag in there and just got it nice and cooked it to al dente. So the butternut squash is completely done and cooked through. I'm just kind of letting that cool for a little bit. One way I like to test and make sure that the butternut squash are completely cooked through is I just kind of push down on it a little bit, and if it's nice and soft, then I know that it is completely done and cooked through evenly. So I'm gonna take the insides out, like all of the meat out of the butternut squash, and just put that in a bowl and set that aside. So on the stovetop, I took about 3 tablespoons of butter and just got it melting. And then I'm gonna take a 14-ounce can of my diced tomatoes. These are just plain diced tomato with no seasoning in it. And I'm just gonna drain the juice. I'm not sure why the recipe recommended to do that, but I was doing it. And then I'm gonna take 1/4 cup of flour and just slowly whisk that into the butter. And I'm just gonna cook it until some of that flour, like the raw flour smell, is off and it starts to smell nice and nutty. I'm gonna come in and add a little bit of salt and pepper, and then I'm gonna slowly whisk in, I believe I used 2 cups of half and half in this. You can use a whole milk, you can use like a heavy cream if you want. I just kind of wanted to go in the middle, and I'm gonna just slowly whisk it in. That way we don't get any clumps in the mixture. And then I'm gonna come and add that extra reserved tomato juice that we drained out of our tomatoes and just whisk that until it's all combined together. Next, I'm gonna take that butternut squash meat that we just scraped out of the butternut squash, and I'm gonna whisk that in so that everything is incorporated together. And you wanna bring that to a boil. Once it gets to a boil, we're gonna come in and we're gonna add 1 cup of a smoked cheddar cheese. You can use whatever cheese you want in this. I'm just doing what I have available in my fridge. So I added 1 cup of cheddar cheese, half a cup of Parmesan, and then half a cup or maybe 1 cup full of mozzarella cheese. We're just gonna stir it, and then we're gonna add those tomatoes in, stir that all together, and then add the noodles in. Get everything incorporated. Make sure the noodles have all of that sauce covering them. Now I found that this was a touch bit too thick, so I came in and added probably another 1/4 cup of half and half cream just to thin it out a little bit. You could also even use probably a broth in this as well. So I am taking a 9x13 casserole dish and just taking some butter and just getting it all kind of greased around the pan. You just want it to be good and coated. You could even use like a cooking spray in this as well. I have my oven preheated to 375 degrees, and we're just gonna add that noodle sauce mixture into this pan, and we're just gonna cook it for approximately 25 to 30 minutes. You just want it to be nice and bubbly, and just you want the cheese to be really melty. It was really, really good. It was a little bit too thick for my liking. Probably, again, thin it out with a little bit of broth, but it was good. I enjoyed it. Put a little salt and pepper on it, and it was a perfect way to use a butternut squash. For the next meal, we are gonna make something that I have been craving for a really, really long time. I have been craving a steak salad with some homemade Caesar salad dressing and homemade croutons, just all the fixins. I have been craving it. So that's what I decided to make on this night. So I had some stale bread, and all I do to make croutons is I just take the bread. I used about 2 slices, 2 pretty thick slices, and just cubed it up into 1-inch cubes. Added a little bit of olive oil. I probably added about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to that, and then about 1 teaspoon both of garlic powder and onion powder, and then probably a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, some salt and pepper. I would say maybe about half a teaspoon each, and then stir it up. And then I realized that I didn't quite have enough olive oil on it, so I came back in and added another tablespoon of olive oil. You just want to make sure that the bread is coated with that mixture. You do not want the bread to be soggy. You're just wanting to lightly coat it because we're going to toast these. I have the oven set at 400 degrees, and I'm going to put these in for about 15 to 20 minutes. You just want to pay attention and make sure that they're not getting burnt. So next up, we're gonna make the Caesar salad dressing. I realized that I had no mayonnaise, so I'm gonna make some mayonnaise from scratch. All I do to do that is I take 1 whole egg, 1 egg yolk, mix that together, and then I add 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, 1 teaspoon of ground mustard, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, and you're just gonna mix that together. Once you get that combined, you're gonna come in and slowly immersion blend in 1.5 cups of a light tasting olive oil. And you just want to mix that until you get to the consistency of the mayonnaise. So I have some romaine lettuce here that I had picked up from a local farmer's market. So I'm just getting that all cleaned up. And then once I get it nice and washed, I'm going to cut it into bite-sized pieces and then just throw this in my salad spinner and just get that all clean. So now we're going to get the Caesar dressing started. This turned out so amazing. amazing. This is for sure my go-to recipe. So to make this Caesar dressing, we're gonna add 3/4 cup of mayonnaise, 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese. I definitely recommend using a fresh shredded Parmesan cheese in this, 1 large clove of garlic minced, 1 teaspoon of anchovy paste. If you don't have anchovy paste, which I did not, I actually used a Worcestershire sauce and I used probably about 2 teaspoons in there, and then 1 teaspoon of lemon juice and ground black pepper. And then you just want to combine all the ingredients together and stir it really well, and that is it. Then you have your Caesar dressing. So easy to make. The croutons were done cooking, so we took those out of the oven just to cool down a bit. So next up, we are going to get our steak seared. We do not want to have this steak well done. We want to lightly cook it. So I'm just salt and peppering both sides of the steak, adding about 1 tablespoon of butter to a hot skillet, and I'm also going to add in probably about 1 tablespoon of olive oil as well. Put that steak in, season the other side of it with some salt and pepper, and then we are just going to lightly sear this on both sides. Once I get a nice sear on the side, I have my oven preheated at 400 degrees, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter on top and just throw that in the oven. I think I put it in for maybe 5-10 minutes. We like our steak medium rare, almost to the point of rare. I didn't let this sit long enough, otherwise it wouldn't have been as juicy, but it still was amazing. It was so tender. It was just exactly what I was craving. So you want to slice that into nice thin pieces. Now the salad that I used, I actually put a touch bit of kale in it as well because we had a little extra in the fridge. Put that in this nice big bowl, put a little bit of chopped up avocados in there, put in those croutons that we made with our fresh sourdough bread, or not fresh sourdough bread, our stale sourdough bread. And there's the Caesar dressing, and we put some steak on it. Definitely top it with a little bit of Parmesan cheese too, and it's just, yes, it was exactly what I needed that particular night. For the last meal, we are going to do a sweet treat, and I'm so excited to share this with you. So I was on Pinterest and I seen this. It wasn't a recipe, it was almost just like a reel. So there isn't a recipe for me to leave linked for you, but I will leave the directions to what I used in this. So we're gonna make a apple pie enchilada. Tastes as good as it sounds. So what we're gonna do is take a can of sweetened condensed milk, and we're gonna put about 1/4 cup on a bottom of a 9x13 casserole dish. I would recommend greasing your casserole dish before you do this. I did not do it, and it made for a very messy dish to clean up. So definitely, if you can, put some cooking spray on it before you put the condensed milk in. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to take some tortillas. I'm just using a flour tortilla. Definitely recommend flour for this. And then we're going to take a jar of our apple pie filling, and we are just going to put the apple pie filling into the inside of the tortilla and roll it up just like you would an enchilada. One thing that I'm going to try next time I make this is I'm going to actually put some cream cheese in there with the apple pie filling just to kind of make it extra delicious. Then once you get them all rolled up and in your casserole dish, you are going to put the rest of the sweetened condensed milk on top and just make sure that it evenly coats all of them. And then next up, we are going to make kind of like a streusel crumble topping for the top of it. So I am taking some light brown sugar, just lightly packed 1/2 cup brown sugar, and then 1/2 cup of an all-purpose flour. And then I probably used about a tablespoon of cinnamon, and then 1 stick of a cold butter. And what you want to do is just cut that butter into cubes and then just grind it in with a what are these called? Pastry blender. You could also use your food processor as well. I just like to do it this way. That way I don't have to dirty another appliance. I noticed that it wasn't getting as finely ground up as I wanted, so I came in and ended up finishing it with my hands. So after you get it completely to a nice crumble consistency, cover the top of your enchiladas with it. And then we have our oven preheated at 400 degrees. Now I put this in to start at 25 minutes, and it did not come out the way that I wanted it to. It wasn't as cooked through. So I ended up putting it in for another 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, this is how it came out. I let the sound on so you guys can hear how bubbly and delicious it sounds. Oh, so good. This would taste so amazing with some vanilla ice cream or whipping cream on top of it. I unfortunately didn't have any, so I just had it plain, but yeah, definitely delicious. So this is the last meal on this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I always say, I hope I gave you a little inspiration for your upcoming meals this week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.